on for just a couple of seconds because then it becomes the thumbnail on Facebook. And that's right. So now, okay, Lucas, I think it's good. Lucas is our producer today. Welcome, Lucas. Lucas and our guest has been having fun talking about hockey. Our guest today. I don't like to do a big bio. I have your bio in the description. Okay. So if anybody's interested in you, they can find it there. I just like to, because I can go through, Jason does this. So This is Jason Newman. I just wanted to introduce him. Welcome to the show,
It's great to be here, Steve.
Now, I've been asking you for some time to be on the show. It's weird how I get people on my show now. I don't know if did I send you a link to all the people, to a lot of...
I've seen some of the guests, but no, I haven't.
Okay, so I have a pretty good list of good guests. Now, I used to do more than just attorneys, but now I kind of just do attorneys. Although our last one was Dave Gutman, who was an attorney. He's a cryptocurrency guy, which I'm kind of, and his connection was coinflip.tech. Coinflip is run by a Bannockburn kid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
what is it?
Coinflip is a nationwide ATMs, crypto ATMs.
Wow.
It's a pretty big company.
I wouldn't even know what that is.
Yeah.
Shows you how focused on crypto I am.
It's a big company. They just got some money and they moved into the old post office downtown. And it was
there
like
2 nights ago.
It was up on the roof.
I was there Monday night. I was at the post office for the App Properties Rolex party, actually.
Did you get a Rolex? Yeah.
I got one. I got one previously, but once you get one, you're allowed to go, you're in the club, so to speak.
It's like getting a green jacket?
It's like getting a green jacket. And this is the last year they're actually doing the Rolexes because they can't get them anymore. So they've switched to, now it's called the Timeless Awards.
Tell people what that is, though.
So basically, App Properties has had a program for many years where agents that do a volume of approximately $10 million in one calendar year are awarded with a watch. So
pretty nice.
A Rolex of your choice. Yeah. So yeah, I'm proud that I got it for my work in 2021. So
nice.
Yeah.
2021 was a big year for realtors.
It was a big year. Yeah. No complaints.
I don't know if you know this, but I help realtors with tax problems because so many have tax problems. Because when you get into being a realtor, you think I'm going to work for this outfit, but you're really working for yourself, aren't you?
We're all independent business people. Yeah.
So if you say, I'm a 1099 employee, and I have to stop and say, there's no such thing as a 1099 employee. You ain't an employee.
An independent contractor. Yeah.
So many people get caught,
Absolutely.
Because as realtors, you guys get big paydays, and then there's some time in between. Often, maybe not for you, but for many. So
thankfully, I don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
So let me just talk about how I met Jason. And I was thinking about this, Jason, how long I've known you. I'm not sure if it was 2010 or got to be right around there. Did you do bankruptcies too, or did you?
So I've been practicing. I've been doing creditor work since 2001.
Oh.
So I've been doing foreclosure. This is my...
As I was. So maybe did you do bankruptcy?
I did bankruptcy as well, yeah. So
so that's probably where... We
may have first met in federal court. Yeah, I've been doing... So I did bankruptcy for about 10 years in all the Collard counties. Will Kane, Lake,
I did that.
DuPage,
I did the same thing.
You name it, McHenry, Kane.
You did the circuit.
Yeah, and then I've been practicing foreclosure law for this is my 22nd or 23rd year. So since 2001. And that's in...
That's about when I became an attorney.
2001? So we graduated?
2000.
Okay, so you're a year before me.
Yeah, and as we've already figured out, I'm much older than you.
You look great, Steve. Yeah.
Good liar.
Well, I think it's almost more impressive that you went to law school at an older age than I did, because I had only taken a year off in between undergrad and grad school. I think it's far more difficult to get your law degree or any graduate degree for that matter when you've taken a significant number of years off.
I had years off before I got my BA. I went back and fought to get my BA. And I went part-time to Loyola at night as an iron worker. So I worked.
That's a great story.
So I did that. And I talk about this a lot because life's a marathon.
It is.
So you don't have to rush through it. Now, having said that, I got 2 boys that are trying to rush through it. So, but we'll talk about that a little bit. I always mention about being an attorney, and you're an attorney.
We've known each other a long time. I mean, probably maybe since later than you think. I think at least
I was going to say 2010 because foreclosure work, but then I was thinking I probably know him from bankruptcy, and so that I was doing those in early 2000, right?
Oh yeah, 2001 I was.
And then you were creditor's attorney, and that's what I was going to get at is like what as an attorney, who do you deal with? The guy on the other side.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of other bankruptcy attorneys. Maybe Ray Kaplan. You know Ray Kaplan?
Of course. Yeah, well, I know who she is. Yeah, sure.
Back
in the day, Bennett Kahn was going to court when I dealt with that firm. So
and Kahn is now in the trustee's office, isn't he?
And I have no idea. I haven't seen him in 10, 12 years. But I remember Bennett Kahn used to stand up for them, and he was the guy that went for her father.
And I remember when because she came in around 2000. I know Ray. She's been on the show a couple of times. We also sponsor a show together. She does a lot of, as you know, she does a lot of bankruptcy. Took over from her dad, who had a big bankruptcy practice, and she does a lot of student loan stuff now. So if you know anybody needs student loan help, Ray Kaplan is the one.
I'm kind of pissed I paid mine off. Actually, many years ago with what's going on now. It sounds like I could have had a check written for me.
I understand, but I get it. And it's like it's the same thing with taxes. Is that I always tell people, man, if you don't have anything, there's 1,000 programs for you. You got something? No programs for you. Here's the program. Pay. That's your program.
That's what it is.
The only thing I try to get is do it in an orderly fashion without the IRS taking everything away from you, because that's what they want to do, right? I say to the IRS, here's their plan to pay them back. Pay everything yesterday.
That's how they do it.
That's what they want.
Thank God I don't know, but I mean, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I can understand.
So that's where I fight them. But anyway, I wanted to break because I was thinking about as an attorney who the people that you really get to know are the people that are on the other side. Don't do what you do, because I don't talk to other bankruptcy attorneys. We got no, I see them in court and stuff. Yeah. Although now we don't go to court anymore. So I know some they're moving back to that, but I know some of the judges are doing both. I still do some bankruptcy work, not a lot. Usually very complicated tax stuff. Okay. If I do, I remember I was in front of Trustee Leibowitz, and it was an easy case, and because it was a friend of a friend. He said,
"David for 20 years, nice guy,
nice
over
guy.
20 years,
and he said to me, Steve, what are you doing with this case? Usually, have really complicated cases." He likes to cross swords.
He's a brilliant bankruptcy attorney.
Yeah,
he's one of the guys that you go to if you have questions.
He's a sharp cookie.
Oh, for sure.
I give him that. Yeah. Yes, and very meticulous, and knows probably the. But I always say I never tell anybody who they're, who I think I don't want, like my clients, and then. Without a doubt, the client that I don't want, David Leibowitz, he's a guy.
That's how it ever happens,
right? So anyway, but again, because as an attorney, when you're talking to people, we're dealing with the same case, and so we're going back and forth on that, and so that's so again, you're right. I've probably known you since early 20s.
Well, I was thinking on the way over here, because I probably feel like you must have appeared with me back in my early days, and I'm like, I hope I wasn't too tough, but I'm hoping I didn't beat him up too bad, because I was such an an advocate.
You know Amy Aronson?
Of course, yeah. Okay.
So Amy, we had some words on a case. Amy's a friend of mine, right? So we were at the same train stop for many years. So I'd see Amy in the morning and stuff, and so we became friends. Yeah. But I remember our first battle was a battle. She was really tough, but I'm good. I'm okay with that.
That's part of, I think, our practice, right? I mean, and because we were adversaries, we were never on the same side. And you're right, that is how you often get to know people. And I happen to be, because I've been doing creditor work, and the foreclosure attorneys that represent the banks all know each other pretty much. You know what I'm saying? And my practice is a little bit different than everyone else's.
Yeah, because you help a lot of different people.
Yeah, I began basically working for a firm for 1 year out of law school, Houseman and Rapp, and I opened my own practice at, I think, 27.
You're ahead of me, because we're going to get there.
Yeah,
but that's one of the questions I always ask people is what was your first job out of law school? Because that often becomes what you do.
It often becomes what you do, and it's when you're in law school. I mean, I don't know if you want me to get into that, but it's you think you know what you're going to do, and I guess some people do know. I thought I was going to go into criminal law. I did the criminal clinic, and I was in law.
Where'd you go?
I went to Case Western Reserve in Cleveland.
What brought you there?
It's funny. So I have some cousins in Cleveland. My brother, who I'm very close with.
Because you're from here, aren't you?
I'm born and raised in Chicago. Yeah. My brother was a Division I hockey player. He was playing at Bowling Green. And I was an undergrad at the University of Denver. I didn't get to see his first couple of years. So I looked at law schools that were within a couple of years of Bowling Green so I could go on weekends to watch him play. And I had considered University of Cincinnati, Ohio State, all the ones in Chicago, of course, and Northern and Southern Illinois. And when it came down to it, I actually went to a funeral in Cleveland for a great uncle of mine. I got picked up from Cleveland Airport. This is when I was applying for law schools. And he drove me up a street called Carnegie in Cleveland. And we went through the Case Western Reserve campus. I didn't even know the school was in Cleveland. I said, oh, this is Case Western Reserve. I saw it on the rankings. And when you go through Little Italy, and I'm a big fan of Italian food, there's art museums nearby. It's a really cool area called University Circle there, and it goes into Cleveland Heights. And I was pretty blown away with the campus. And I said, you know what, I'm going to apply here. And it's only 2 hours from Bowling Green. So I ended up there for 3 years. Lived there full time, love Cleveland. I'm the guy that will always stick up for Cleveland if anyone rips on Cleveland, because even though I have no direct ties there other than some,
That's cousins, a pretty direct tie.
It's a direct tie, but I think it's an underrated Midwest city. I mean, back behind Chicago, I put it in second place. I think it's a better city than Detroit or St. Louis, Minneapolis, any of those. I think Cleveland's a fun place. I had great times there.
I've been to Cleveland, been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That's a cool
been
place.
Been to the ballpark.
The ballpark's great. Were you there for when the Cubs?
I was not there for that. I would have liked to be there. I did see the third game at Wrigley Field.
Okay.
When we came back to work, that was. I had sold my other 2 games because I'm a season ticket holder.
Yeah.
So I had sold the other 2 games, which paid my next year for those 2 games. And then that Sunday game, you couldn't give those tickets away. We have, because I've lived it, baby, against my Florida or against
San Diego,
against LA,
San Francisco in '89. This is something that our producer here will never experience.
Yeah. Although I think '89 wasn't that the 1-game playoff against San Francisco where we won?
'89 was a year where I know Dunston was an all-star. That was, I think, Maddox's last year as a Cub, if I'm not mistaken, the greatest pitcher of all time that they let go to Atlanta. So
I know that Sean Dunston, you were saying that you're a big fan of his, and he was playing with San Francisco, and he came back to play with the Cubs, and he was playing right field. My tickets are right there in right field.
I actually had the opportunity to see Sean Dunston hit a home run in the World Series in Anaheim, actually,
really?
When he was with San Francisco. They lost in 7 games to the Angels that year, but he did go yard, I think, in Game 6 as a veteran in his late 30s. He had a really great career, storied career.
So he comes to Chicago, and he's in right field.
I think 2 or 3 cents.
And everybody's yelling at him, and I look, and my seats are right on the wall there, so he's right there, and I say, "Hey, Sean!" He looks over. I said, "The Sean-o-meter says, welcome home." And he's like, look, I was over. He just thought that was the greatest thing. Yeah. The crowd went wild because he was a big Chicago favorite.
I would say he was one of the top. I mean, with Durham and Dawson. I mean, Sean Dunston was the shortstop for more than a decade. Yeah. Period. Dunston to Sandberg was what you saw back in the day. You knew who you were going to see at the ballpark.
Just the other day, I was here at Rosati's.
Yeah.
Ryan Sandberg walked by. He's going into Yanni's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I stopped him. I said, I look, Ryan Sandberg. Yeah. He says, yeah. I said, I got up. I said, I got to shake your hand. I'd be remiss if I didn't shake your hand. So I shook his hand.
It's a big cup.
But it was I mean, walking right by me, like, whoa. So, but yeah, as a big Cub fan, he's another one that's up at the top. So, again, when you talk about Cleveland and you went to law school there, and I have 2 sons. You met my sons. Mm-hmm. My oldest son just graduated law school.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. That's amazing.
About 2 weeks ago.
That's amazing.
My youngest son is in law school. And I think he's a 2L now. So as an attorney, what kind of advice would you have for new lawyers, for my kids, but for other guys that are in law school? You mentioned that you did some criminal
clinic
work. When I went to law school, I was still working. I didn't do any clinics or anything. I didn't even know they existed, to be honest with you. So what kind of advice would you have for people that are in law school or just getting out of law school?
It's so different now than when I got out of law school. When I graduated was around the same time. 2001. I was moving back to Chicago, and back then you took the bar exam. First, we had to study for the bar, right? You took the Barbary course. You took the bar exam, and then you literally waited until they mailed you the results, like in the mail. Okay, there was no email you checked. You didn't call a phone number. Like literally, I remember going home from my temping job in the Loop. My father lived in the West Loop at the time. I walked home down Jackson, and I checked the mailbox till it came in. And they used to say I don't remember if you wanted a thick envelope or a thin envelope, but once I found out I passed the first time, I said, thank God.
Once you passed the bar, you realize it was an easy test. Only when after you passed, because back then they didn't tell you it was only pass or fail.
Well, listen, when I took it, I think it was 75% pass rate. So you think about that, 78%, 1 in 4 people who went to an accredited law school did not pass the bar exam.
One thing I learned when I went to law school is how smart that they were. When I went to Loyola, and when I went back, because early I wasn't that great of a student.
Yeah.
But when I went back and I was on the pay-as-you-go program, I was a straight-A student. Right? So
when it's coming out of your own pocket, you tend to take it a little bit more seriously.
I was a little older.
Same thing happened for me.
And I was a little older, and so I was an A student. So I got this law school. Then you go to law school, and it's like, well, everybody was kind of an A student.
Most people try and work hard in law school, for the most part.
Yes, it's a competition. It's very competitive, yes.
It can be, and I think, so from when I got out, all the .coms back then had gone belly up, or they were bursting at that time. And previously, all the big firm guys were going to these startups, so there were jobs everywhere. So this was a tough time to get a job.
Let me tell you this. When I was in 2001, I told you I got my master's in IT. I have in IT law.
Wow.
So I have a master's, and that was the time, the .com bust. You think you're going to get a job? No job.
Sounds like it'd be a useful master's, though. Even nowadays.
You think so? It still is. I'm a tech guy, as you can kind of.
Technology's changed in 20 years, too.
Well, yeah. It's made things a lot easier than it used to be.
For sure, yeah.
So, but
as far as advice, So I got out. I knew this. I wanted to be in court, okay? And I thought I wanted to be a state's attorney. Couldn't even get an interview with Cook County State's Attorney Office at the time. They had a hiring freeze. So I met with the public defender's office. They thought my mindset was a little bit more prosecutorial. Long story short, I ended up in foreclosure law. Got hired and ended up going right into court every day. So I guess you could say the advice that I would give is keep an open mind unless you really know what you're going to go into, because you don't know until you're doing it. And to compare your career path to my career path to someone that does real estate closings, which I don't do.
You don't do any?
I don't do any closings. Really? I'm a full-time realtor. I don't do closings. A, it's a conflict. B, I just have no desire. That's just not my area of practice. And it's a completely different thing to be a transactional attorney from a litigator, or someone that does family law, or someone that represents kids in court, or does criminal law. There's some guys that think they can do a little bit of each thing, obviously, but they're all different.
As a foreclosure attorney, I did a lot of closings. Yeah. As short sales, I did a lot of short sales, and they were very lucrative for a time. And then the mortgage company stopped funding it. Right. So then I stopped doing them. So I don't do any anymore. I don't do any. Mm-hmm. So when people come to me now and ask me to do a closing, I said, get somebody who does it all the time. That's the exact same thing I say. I have one guy that I work. Jeff Dovitz? No, I don't. So Jeff Dovitz, who's with Cohen Dovitz in Macauca, he'd be a great guest for you. They're out in Orland, but he's been around for 20 years. He does all my closings. And believe it or not, he and I used to own a real estate brokerage together for many years. He's still a licensed realtor, doesn't practice, but he's got a knowledge of not only obviously real estate law, but foreclosure law. He worked for Cadillus for many years. Mm-hmm. You'd probably recognize him if you saw him. What's his first name? Jeff. So what I'm learning is, as we were on the call yesterday, is that I still recognize a lot of the old timers that are that are still, we're coming back, right? Because we took a hiatus because there wasn't a lot of cases for some years, but it's coming back. Talk a little bit. I hate to kind of get off. We'll go back to what we were talking about, but talk a little bit about that. Do you see that coming back? Is you see more cases now? Someone asked me that today actually, and it's hard for me to say because I literally now my practice has changed, and you'd have to understand my practice, how it how it evolved and everything to understand kind of my perspective of this. But I am now in court every day, 5 days a week, but throughout the entire state of Illinois. Whereas
prior to the pandemic, I was solely in Cook County for the last decade. Okay. Back in the day, I used to travel a little bit if it made sense for me, if it was worthwhile, or I'd have local. Amy Aronson would cover for me in Rockford, for, example, back in the day for bankruptcy law. But for foreclosure law, I really didn't get referrals outside of Cook County because there was plenty for me
in Cook County.
In Cook County, I lived in the city for so long. It was perfect for me, so I didn't have to go anywhere. Once the pandemic came and they opened up Zoom court, I have an of counsel position with a fantastic law firm out of Ohio called Sotili and Brilli. They're out of Middleburg Heights, Ohio, not far from Cleveland, incidentally. And
did your connection to
had nothing to do with it. They knew who I was just back. I worked with Mary Spitz, who was at Anselmo for years. She's wonderful, great attorney. The two principal partners there are brilliant guys, and I had been doing some work for them along with several other firms before the pandemic in Cook County. And then once the pandemic came, we made kind of an arrangement. So I'm of counsel there. I'm in counties I've never even heard of. Okay, I mean outside of St. Louis and Southern Illinois.
Obviously Zoom.
All Zoom, yeah. And
are any of them changing?
So there's a couple of them that are changing slowly, or if there's a contested hearing, they want you to show up. But I will say this: number one, the Zoom has changed my life. It's been great for me. I think for our area of practice, to expect a pro se defendant who's got a home in foreclosure that clearly needs to work to earn a living, to take half a day or a full day off of work, to go and pay for parking or drive and pay for gas money right now, to go to a courthouse.
And find out that they're there the wrong day for some deal that they didn't even have to be there for.
But even if they're there the right day, it could have taken a matter of minutes via Zoom. They can be there with a loved one who can be there with them potentially or whatever. They don't have to take a day off. They can watch their kids. And
I agree with this.
I'm always there to answer questions if they have that. The judges have been great. So for the most part, this process has been unbelievable. But getting back to your former question, as far as do I think the volume's going up? Yeah, it's going to go up because courts were closed for so long. So obviously, okay, there was, as I'm sure you know, the CARES Act, which allowed people to defer mortgage payments for a minimum of 12 months, right, with no questions asked. Is that accurate? I'm asking you that.
That's true.
So because of that, there's naturally going to be people that fell behind, that when that 12 months is up or whatever it is, they're not going to have that money because they didn't budget properly or they were laid off or whatever it is. So yes, foreclosures are going to go up, I think, over the next several months, years, whatever it is, compared to where we were the last few years. Are we going to see another 2008, 9, 10? Not a chance.
I don't think so either.
There's no
only
chance.
Only because the mortgage companies had learned a lesson then.
Everyone has.
They're not rushing to foreclosure court because it's not profitable.
But the market is such, and real estate is such, where we're never going to see that epidemic again. Okay. Think about how many appraisals
let's hope that's true.
Appraisers have were gone because of the fraud. I mean, there was just so much nonsense that happened for so long that I saw this coming in 2006. When you watch The Big Short, I wish I would have known that guy. I could have told him in 05, 06, 07 that this was all coming. I wish I could have, hedged it. But, when the world ended, back in 08, 09, 10, that happened for different reasons. And these people that think the bubble's going to burst in real estate, we're going to have all these foreclosures, at least in this market, I would bet anything against that happening.
One of the reasons is the increase in interest rates, right? People want to hold on to the home. So there's not a lot of homes on the market because people don't want to move. They want to hold on to the 3%, the 2% that they have.
Hit the nail on the head. And if they are going to move, why not rent that asset out? Because now rents are up. So if people can use real estate to create wealth, and that's what a lot of my clients are doing now because they found that you have that mortgage rate you don't want to mess with, okay? Well, if you can cash flow your place, save up a little bit more money, find a place you love that really fits your needs, theoretically you're not only eating away at that principal sum every single year, you're taking the deductions on taxes and interest theoretically, right, as well, if you're doing it the right way, okay? And your property's appreciating. So you're getting equity both ways. And look, if rates go down in 6 months, a year, you refinance. And if they don't, you should have bought anyway at this point because that means they're going to go up.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So, I mean, when you're obviously a little bit older than me, you said, what were rates when you got out of, when you first bought your first place?
Lucas, I like the way you said, obviously a little bit.
Well, you said you were. Yeah. You said you were. So,
well, the fact is, it is obvious. But
where were rates in the 90s, right? In the early 90s. The first place I bought, they were at 6. Yeah. Okay. What are they at today? Around the same thing. So It's not like, people think, oh, it's the rates, it's the rates, it's the rates. I think it's one factor, okay? I think there's several factors. I think the pandemic had, without question, the biggest factor on where real estate sits today. Because whether you're a first-time buyer, someone that's a seasoned investor, whatever you are, people are looking for different things now in real estate than they were prior to the pandemic. And I don't care if you're in Chicago, the West Coast, the East Coast, southern part. That's why there's been so much movement in so many different markets. But, I don't even remember what the original question was, but the market, the market is such that if you're asking me if we're going to see a lot of defaults, okay, I can't really comment on that. I've been very consistent. So
I'm going to go back to the Zoom call because I think that because Zoom has changed things, And as a bankruptcy, when you go to bankruptcy, and as I mentioned, I don't do a hell of a lot of them anymore.
Yeah.
But it makes it. I was hiring someone to do my appearances and stuff. Anyway,
what were you going on a motion to modify? Is some guy's trying to lift the stay, and you're trying to?
Well, even if I was just going to get it confirmed at a Chapter 13, I'd always hire someone to go anyway because I stopped going to court. Same thing with foreclosure court. I stopped going because if I had a case back in the day, I had a case in Joliet, or as I say, Joliet, and I had to drive all the way down there. It was a days for an hour maybe so it made much more sense to hire someone to go do it, but it's better if I can do it myself. I know that in Kendall County, and I mentioned this before, a lot of Kendall County now has gone back in person, and my own opinion is they don't want Chicago lawyers up there, right? So if it's in Zoom, they're getting inundated. Right, so the local attorneys are like, "Wait a minute, so they want."
That's a theory, I think.
They want to give their own, and it makes sense, right? They don't want people calling in from Chicago when they got their practice out there, because now I can compete with them in their market. If I got to travel there, I can't. But
I don't know why you wouldn't want the attorney whose name is on the pleading, to be there in court. You want the attorney whose case it is, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're sending someone in your stead and they're not familiar with the facts or they can't.
Yeah, but again, like this with foreclosure, it's a default call. I'm going to get 28 days.
Oh yeah, for that. I'm saying for them though, the benefit would be to have the actual counsel there. Yeah, for you, of course, yeah. Now that's the case, right? It's more streamlined nowadays than it used to be back in the day. Because I remember it wasn't like that necessarily. Originally. But
now if you, and I think just for people that to know, because if you're a very diligent person, you really shoot yourself in the foot with as a defendant in foreclosure, because you don't understand the system, and so you're doing all the things that it says to do, like file your answer and appearance within 30 days. And so you're diligent. You do that. You're just shooting yourself. It's the wrong thing to do. But how do you know that? You can't know that. Unless someone like me tells you, right? But
you're saying as an attorney or as a pro se?
No, as a pro se.
Okay,
as a pro se.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're diligent, and so you get served that says file your appearance within 30 days. Well, again, you're hurting yourself.
But I also think that that's not necessarily true in every case, respectfully, because I think some people just want to solve it and get it over with as soon as possible.
I get that.
They don't want it hanging over their heads. So they want to try and effectuate something. And I think the sooner, if you plan on saving your home and really effectuating something like a loan modification or even whatever it is, a deed in lieu, any type of loss mitigation or, what do they call it? A dignified exit, right? Where you can get out of there as unscathed as possible. You want to face it head on if you can and kind of talk with the servicer or talk with the law firm to try and resolve it. But I get what you're saying. If the name of the game is to drag it out.
No, because you could do all of those things you're just saying without even worrying about the court case, right? Because they're two separate things, aren't they? Isn't a modification and the court case two separate things? Don't they tell the defendant that every day in court? The judge will say, "Okay, you're working with the mortgage company. Keep doing that, but don't forget that this case is going, and they're not really tied together, right?" So you could be talking with the mortgage company, and you think, and I've seen this happen so many times, and you have too. Where the defendant's like, "Well, I'm talking with the mortgage company and they're working with me," and all along they're going forward with the foreclosure case and they're getting a judgment against you, and you think you're working with the mortgage company, and they get a judgment against you, and you didn't expect it because you thought they were working with you. So that's what I'm talking about. Yes, you could still do that and still play the game.
Yeah.
Again, I always tell people the only way you know how this works is by going and understand how it works.
Yeah.
Right? You can't know this stuff unless you're there seeing how it unfolds. I know when I first started with foreclosure work, I was a bankruptcy attorney. So I started helping people with Chapter 13s.
That's how a lot of guys started. Doing the defense work.
And so I just, I was giving it away.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, before 2008, you're not getting loan modification. The only way to stop it was Chapter 13, or they took the house, or you sold. That's the only way. There was no such thing as a loan modification.
Yeah.
I did see one loan modification before 2018. I had a client who had cancer, and she had missed a couple of payments because of treatment, and they modified the loan and let her pay it back over a period of time. That's the only time I ever had that. And then 2008 comes, right, and then modifications become the norm, and now they're the norm, right? And then goes back to what you were saying before. That's why I think that you're not going to see a huge bunch of defaults, because the mortgage companies are saying, let's just modify it and move ahead. Because in the end, we're better off, and you're better off, and it's a better off system.
The world is better off.
Yes, the world is better off.
Everyone is better.
I agree with that.
Maybe you're not, and maybe
No, I'm okay because I don't. There hasn't been a lot of foreclosure. Now, let me tell you this.
But it's better for everyone's real estate values, and it's better for society.
I agree with that.
People need places to live.
Because what happened with the market going down? Because there was so much on the market, right? It's simple economics. More on the market, the price goes down, right?
You would think. But I have so many theories about how Chicagoland, was affected back then. I mean, the different markets in the city, how are they affected? I think it's complicated. How the markets were affected back in the day, but.
It's true.
It's true. I mean, there were,
So I'm going to go back to something.
Yeah.
I was because I talk about my kids and that they're both in. I don't know. Should I call them kids anymore? They're 20,
kids. They're your kids. They're always going to be your kids.
They're 22 and 24.
That's a kid. 22 is a kid.
So yeah, isn't that right, Lucas?
He's a kid. Yeah, for sure. You don't have to have life file. You don't have to have life figured out at 22. If you watch Gary Vaynerchuk's a great guy. You know Gary V?
Sure.
Gary V's great. He'll tell people at 35, you don't have to have it figured out. I think he's right. Because you see people.
I just said life is a marathon.
You don't know how many realtors I come into contact with that are former attorneys. And they say to me, oh, you're a former lawyer. I said, no, I'm not former. I'm a practicing attorney for a long time. I take it very seriously. But I understand why you're not anymore. And that's great. And I'm happy for you. You went into a different career.
Because that's not what you wanted to do.
You should follow your heart in life always.
I agree with that.
And it doesn't matter if you're 60, 20, 18. I don't care how old you are.
I know Gary V talks to realtors a lot and more.
He talks to everyone. He's fantastic.
No, but he does talk to everybody, and I do follow Gary V. But I have a good friend of mine who's a mortgage guy, David Hochberg. You ever heard of David Hochberg? Really? Anyway, he did this. Gary V recently did a convention for mortgage brokers, and it was on YouTube, and I sent it to David. And what does he talk about? Content. Right? You got to be on where everybody is. Social media. That's where they are. So you better be there, right? Yeah. So he makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So now you got me, Gary.
But he's right. He's right. So go back to your kids.
No, you keep diverting me because and Lucas knows this, right? I am Gary V. I am a Gary V. fan.
Yeah.
And I focus on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Look around, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah.
So so I focus on that stuff. So it's so important the way you market your business, the way you market your practice. As we talked about earlier, realtors are business people. I think too many don't think that way, right? You got to think of yourself. I'm in business for myself. How am I going to make my business grow? And that's what Gary V talks a lot about. And again, I think he talks to realtors because he does a lot of realtor conventions and stuff, and tells them, hey, if you're not doing the
he did say that. He said if you're not on TikTok, you're obsolete. And I disagree with that. Yeah, and I don't do them. I never do. I've never put myself out there like that. And I'm not saying I won't, but I get what he's trying to say, and I think he's right to an extent because the younger generation, certainly my children, they watch this crap all day long. Right?
How old are your kids?
I have 10 and 11 girls. Okay, one's about to turn 12. Yeah, so they're in 4th and 6th grade. Thank heaven for little girls. Right? So I've got my own. I have 2 boys. So we have a boy house. Yeah. My brother lived next door to me. As my brother passed, but his wife still lives next door to me, and they had 5 kids, 3 girls. It was kind of a girl house, right? Yeah. It's a different life with girls than it is with boys. It's different with girls, man. And you know what? I will probably eventually do it, but I get what he's trying to say.
Treasure.
The message I like that he always tries to hit home though is, number one, follow your heart. Do what you're passionate about,
I agree with that.
And don't measure success by money.
I agree with that.
Success should be measured by your definition, your metric of success, because when you try and quantify it in terms of, a number or success or what that really means. It's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
And you're going to be chasing something for the rest of your life.
If that drives you, if the money drives you, you'll never achieve it, right?
No. And look, when you're in your 20s, if money is a motivating factor, then that's great. Okay. But if you've got other things, hopefully you have other things in life that eventually as you get older that are important to you, and you realize, it took me years to figure out kind of what the most important things in life are and, what really matters. And
it's so funny because I'm thinking this on the way over here today, because as I said, I live across the street now. So
right.
As you
walked over here?
As I walked over here, I'm thinking about it. What is this? What's successful? What is not successful? How do you judge your own success in life? It's so important. And I try to tell my kids this.
How do you do it? Because I know how I do it now. It took me a long time.
Well, again, this is a difficult. What I know is I'm more concerned about growing my business than I am about how much I make. Yeah. Right. And I'm more, and I look back at, and what was expected of me growing up and where I am. So in that sense, I'm a success.
You're already a success.
So I have 2 boys that were in law school.
It's amazing.
That sense, I'm a success. I have a loving wife. In that sense, and that's really what's important. The money is not a big thing. I do drive. What drives me is to grow my business. That's what drives me. In that sense, maybe not that much success, but I'm working on it. Right? Yeah. It's a work in progress. But I wanted to mention my son Jake, because he has a real estate license too.
Oh, does he?
Yes. He actually represented me when we got this space.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And he worked for Judge Spratt. He was an intern for Judge Spratt.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Judge Spratt.
Yeah. She's great. So he just finished his internship with her. So that now he's working. He's going to become a clerk for the judges for the I think they call it a miscellaneous in the law division. Okay. Doing where they do the eminent domain and taxes.
County?
Yes.
So guys we know for sure.
Cook County.
Men and women we know for sure. Yeah.
One of my favorite guys I just had on show, John Foreign, who's John Foreign.
I don't think I do.
He's the eminent domain guy. Okay. And so he's doing it, and he's going to Northwestern to get a master's in tax law.
So, do you have your LLM?
I have an LLM.
You do? Okay.
An IT, though.
Oh, an IT. I figured you had it in tax.
No, everybody thinks so. And I'll let them think so. I'm not a CPA. I am a business.
Play one on TV.
I do. I have accountants that work for me, but I'm not an accountant. But again, I think you were talking about being involved in law school. So I'm going to go back to that because as I just mentioned, Jake was an intern, and my other son is working for a law firm too. Now, I don't know, when you were in law school, did they make you be an intern somewhere?
No, in fact, I had a very untraditional law school. I went to law school, took a year off in between undergrad and law school, moved to Cleveland, rented an apartment in Little Italy. I had gotten into Loyola, Kent, John Marshall, all those schools. And I knew had I stayed in Chicago, I would have been done in one semester. Okay. My friends went out here. I was 20, I understand. 2 years old. Yeah. There was zero chance of me graduating law school had I stayed in Chicago. So I chose Cleveland, which is, the partying was there if you wanted it, but you didn't have to go out every night. And I worked my second semester of my first year of law school. I clerked for an entertainment attorney, actually in Cleveland, who did copyright stuff. It was pretty interesting, and he had a really interesting case. I remember that I found it wasn't a Supreme, I think it might have been a Supreme Court decision that applied to this case he had that was overseas. It was fascinating. So I really got hands-on working with an attorney as a 1L. And then in my second and third years of law school, I worked. So I worked for another attorney in Cleveland, my whole second year of law school. And then my third year, I was part of the criminal clinic. So I actually represented alleged criminals. And I had one guy.
So here in Illinois, they call it the
7-Eleven license, maybe? Yeah, so I had one of those in Cleveland. And I was super involved in the criminal clinic. I remember I had a guy who had, I don't know how you want me to go into this, but he had some priors, and he had been charged with, because they only let you do misdemeanors, right? You can't do a felony, I think was the rule in Cleveland. So I was in Cleveland Heights, actually, was where I was practicing. That was the Cleveland Heights, whatever they call it, court division or courthouse. And they had referred me to this one guy who was incarcerated. Like he was just in and he couldn't make bail because he had some priors or whatever. So this is right back when I got my first cell phone. Okay, like my last year in law school, I had this Nokia phone. And if you may recall back then, you didn't just have a plan for $39.99 a month.
Minutes.
Every minute counted, right? So, and I had to dial up internet, and it was just a complete and utter, mess. So I give this guy my cell phone number, and I learned at 20.
What a mistake that was.
4, right? While I'm in law school, giving your only client your cell phone number when he's the guy calling you. Like, I mean, my parents would call me on the landline still at my apartment at that point in time. This guy's calling me on my cell phone while I'm in class, everything, and I'm picking it up because that's what I wanted to treat this guy right. So I got this guy as my client, and over the course of several months, he had like a preliminary hearing where they had his, it was a domestic dispute actually. And it's probably good that I had this case because I had his girlfriend or whatever on the stand in a preliminary hearing, and you've seen me in court. Yeah. So this was the early stages of how I was as an attorney. I won't get into too much detail, but let's just say it was a cross-examination where I got a lot of testimony. And when it was time for his hearing, we had a motion in limine in chambers to keep his priors out. And again, I'm there with my law professor, the prosecutor who was there that day, a couple weeks later, and I won the motion in limine hearing. We walk in out of her chambers, the judge's chambers, into the courtroom, and he dropped the misdemeanor charge and upped it to a felony right there, so I couldn't handle the case against him. And that was it. Like, that was it. So I was like, what? What just happened? And I was like complaining. I'm like, how can they do it? They're like, well, anytime they want to find more evidence, they can do this anytime they want. So I could no longer represent him because he was charged with a felony.
That's a pretty big compliment.
So my experience was this motion in limine hearing, right, to keep the stuff out, which I was successful on. I had the one cross-examination hearing, but yeah, once we got to the time for trial, which I had prepared for weeks and weeks and weeks and hours and hours and hours, I didn't get to do it. So they upped it to a felony. I don't even know what happened to the guy. And ultimately, I changed. He
stopped calling you.
I changed from I had a 216 Cleveland area code. Now I moved to Chicago the following year. I went back to 312, thankfully. But yeah, so that was
That's a good story.
That was the story. So I got out of law school, moved back to Chicago, took the bar exam, and you couldn't even really get interviews back then. Like I remember I had somehow 6 interviews while I was waiting for my bar results. I got 4 offers. Okay, I mean, just crazy. One was with a insurance defense firm. Another one was with like a PI firm. But these were not, these jobs were not paying a lot. They're probably not paying much more now, to be honest with you. And it wasn't criminal. And then eventually I meet with Houselman and Rappin, and they explain to me like it's foreclosure, you're going to be doing building court and bankruptcy. And they mention like banks and real estate. And that just sounds, and you'll be in court all day. We'll have so much court for you, you won't believe how much it is. I said, okay. So I took the job. And I worked there for about a year, and a little over a year. And then at some point, I won't get into too much detail, but the Heavner firm out of Decatur, who we were local counsel for, I was appearing for Heavner daily in court and on Houselman stuff. They approached me about covering their stuff. And that's a whole nother show, but I opened my own practice January of 2003 on Martin Luther King Day of 2003. So I celebrated 20 years in practice.
Good for you.
A few months back.
What was Jim's name? Didn't Jim work?
Jim Lowry. He was after me. So for 2001, basically to 2000, I would say 8 or 9, I was the only person basically hiring or covering all of Heavner in Cook County, and then all of their bankruptcy in all of the Collier counties. Okay, and it was not just foreclosure; it was anything in law division. Anything in debt and
whatever they had.
Okay, building court. It was every single. I was in every single divorce cases where they'd consolidate. And I had to cover it all myself. So it was
good experience.
It was very stressful for many years, and then eventually what happened was a lot of other firms came after them. So Friedman Anselmo, which is now Anselmo or Diaz Anselmo, I had them for many years, and Dutton and Jaros Tittle, O'Toole, and Weltman Weinberg, and the list goes on. And Ira Neville, and of course, Sotilli and Barilli. And I used to do, back before there was a foreclosure division, I did Cadillas's Friday afternoon eviction call, which was basically emergency motions or just a handful of cases. I was usually the only one there. And because there was no Friday foreclosures back then. They were just Monday through Thursday, if you might recall. Remember the blue books?
I don't remember that.
Oh, yeah. So this is back before there was a foreclosure division. So I've been doing it longer than you have.
In foreclosures, because I was doing bankruptcies. And it wasn't until probably, again, I would do some appearances, just to buy time to get, so they could get their job back so we could go to Chapter 13.
Oh, yeah.
So that was our strategy.
So you didn't know foreclosure law when it was in general chancery?
No.
So foreclosure was in general chancery. Okay. There were judges that they thought so highly of foreclosure cases. They would do them after the name changes. Okay. Like literally, I'd check in at 9:15, maybe by 10 o'clock I'd be called, right? But back in the day, I'd have 4 or 5 a day, right? I mean, that would be a full day. Then I'd have 4 or 5 a call. Then I'd have 8 or 10 a call. So it became insane, obviously, eventually. So they eventually put the foreclosure cases with the municipal judges on the 11th floor, the building court judges. So Pileggi, Judge Patty, some of the greats. McGing, I think, did some back in the day. Judge Dan Lynch, great guy, if you know who he is.
Too, I do Lynch.
There were a few other ones. A couple guys I'm whose names are escaping me now. There's another Judge Abishi Cunningham, who's now, I think, like the state attorney, if I'm not mistaken.
How about Judge Reyes?
Yeah, well, Reyes was on 28 after that, but he might have been on 11 at that point. I don't know.
But I'm just mentioning him because he did the commencement at my son's.
Oh, did he really? Okay.
And then
he's appellate court now, right?
He's and he was at one of my friends' the holiday party.
Yeah.
And he was there, so I got to spend some time with them.
Okay.
Then too.
I always thought you were from back then, so you don't even know what happened then.
No.
Okay, so
I missed
the whole evolution
because
of the law.
It was at that time. There wasn't a lot of foreclosure cases.
Yeah.
So there was really nothing I could do to help anybody in foreclosure except for try to buy time, because otherwise you're going to lose your home, right? So that when it came to when the numbers started growing, that's when I got into it. That's when I started, as I said, I used to do it for free, and then I'd charge a couple $100, and then I was charging $1,000, and then I charged $2,500.
Well, it depends also, I'm sure, what
the numbers started going up. It's like, wow.
Well, what stage of the case are you coming in at?
Well,
are you coming in when they've had a judgment in there for 2 months and 29 days?
Of course, then right towards the end, then I'm getting them at the beginning and all that. But and then you learn just by going, because I had no one taught me. Right? It's like, I went to court,
and that's how I learned.
Yeah,
you know what I'm
saying?
saying?
How you learn? You go to court,
and then you develop a reputation. You have relationships where hopefully when you're walking into court, hey Jay, and then I remember seeing you, hey, I got this one. I'm like, Steve, you here on this thing? What's going on with this thing? And you're doing the best you can with what you got, and I've got my job to do, and
we all know what the judge is going to do anyway.
Pretty much.
So you can all kind of agree. I'm going to ask for 28 days. Okay, I'll give you 28 days.
That's
don't ask for 45.
But it wasn't always like that. And the funny thing is, so for many years, for the first, I would say many years of my practice, 7-8 years, there was actually an art form to what we did. And we were creating what now is foreclosure law and what now is today's IMFL, and where the case law didn't exist back in the day. Now all of that has gone up.
If you look at case law for foreclosure, there's not a lot of it.
Well,
there's not a lot of appellate court.
Now there is far more.
There's more, but there was not. In 08, 09, you tried to, there was really like 2 or 3 cases.
You would borrow from other jurisdictions. Yeah. You would, and look, we're in a court of equity, right? So at the end of the day, you have the ability, if you're a judge, right?
Do whatever you want.
To look at everything and say, what really should happen here, which is a good thing. But I've always felt that as a creditor's attorney, and again, I've represented, I can count on 2 hands the amount of defendants I've represented in my life, and each one of them in a foreclosure case that I've taken on, obviously I can't have a conflict, but I've been able to help them, okay? Because I won't take a case unless there's life at the end of the day. I want to know what they have to do, know what they're looking to do, and if I can solve the problem for them, and then go from there. But you have a certain level of discretion at times, because you're dealing with pro se people. For the number of years that I did it before you came in, most of them were pro se. Of course, they can't. They don't know their rights. I mean, there were judges back in the day where courtesy copies didn't exist in foreclosure law. So imagine taking a stack of papers, handing it to a judge in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, that's never looked at never looked at the loan documents, and there's a defendant standing next to you. I mean, you could have handed them an 8x10 photo, they would have signed it. Half these guys, you know what I'm saying? And that's how It was, I mean, there were some judges that didn't care at all. Some of them went through it with a fine-tooth comb. Great. Maybe a little bit too closely at times. But that's how it was back in the day. I don't want to say it was the Wild West, but it was comparable to that.
There was nobody there to hold you accountable.
There wasn't. And then as defense attorneys came into play, so many of them just didn't know what they were doing because you'd have a guy, a bankruptcy attorney or a guy that did DUI or divorce that thought he was going to come in and represent his client on a foreclosure case. Whereas you had us that I'm just doing foreclosure. Well, I expect you to be prepared and know the law. And if you don't, unfortunately, your client would have probably been better off not using you and coming in and being pro se. So you have to have a certain level of discretion, I think, now. And thank God the judges are in tune with it. And there's this streamlined system where defendants are getting that opportunity to have their day in court, to see if, it's not about the defenses, because you may remember Judge Simcoe. His famous line was, he's my favorite judge of all time, and I love.
So I like Judge Simcoe, but he's
did you SOJ him ever?
No.
Good, okay, because a lot of defense attorneys did, and every time I'd walk up, he'd look at me and I'd say, I'm offended that someone would actually SOJ the greatest judge to ever sit in Illinois foreclosure law, because he
was there longest too.
He was there. He used to write on the appellate briefs, I think. Okay, when he was clerking back in the day. Not only was he a brilliant man that knew the law backwards and forwards, he was fair to everyone there, but his temperament. Okay, you can be a great judge from the aspect of knowing the law, but like if you're a great judge, you have to be great with your temperament. Not only be respectful of the litigants involved, everyone's.
I mentioned Jim just a minute ago, and we had a great case in front of Judge Simcoe. Yeah. So I have a different idea.
He was a plaintiff's attorney then? Okay.
Yeah, he was a plaintiff's attorney.
He went to the dark side.
I know I did.
He went to your side too. And I officed with him. I don't know if you knew. I officed with him for a couple of years.
He was over there at that. I remember when he went out on his own, and he started to be a defense attorney. Yeah. But we had a great case in front of Judge Simcoe, and he used it often because it was a motion to quash.
Yeah.
I had a woman who had a black woman with blonde hair.
Yeah.
And so many judges, I win that.
Yeah.
With 9 out of 10 of them, but not Judge Simcoe. I didn't win.
Even on the description?
Even on the description.
And it didn't meet African American with blonde hair.
Average height, average weight, average.
You still couldn't win it.
And no, I couldn't win it.
Wow.
But Jim always talked about that one because I brought it up because what did I use? I used their own affidavits. Well, here's his affidavit. Yeah. So because you can't use your own.
Here's my witness. That's not
So Jim thought that was amazing. Yeah. But I lost anyway.
But you saw. Did you ever know Carolyn Quinn and Matt DeLort? So you know some. And now there's great judges. And I think what's been great for me, being in all these other counties now, is that I get to be here for judges in central southern Illinois that I would have never met otherwise. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And there's some really good ones. Mm-hmm. It's cool to see your area of practice applied in
somewhere else,
Moni or wherever, Yorkville or Tazewell County or Pekin, wherever these places are, to see how they apply the law and they run their courtrooms and they do things. It's sometimes their procedures are a little different, but the law is the same.
Yeah.
And it's at the end of the day now it's changed so much.
So I didn't even ask you any of my normal questions.
Ask me your normal questions. We're talking about foreclosure because
I haven't really. But we're already at over an hour. Not that we don't have time.
Sorry,
No, that's fine. But I went to a courthouse in Rockland, Illinois.
Okay.
And so when I walked in the courthouse, there wasn't any metal detectors. There was nobody at the door. There was no, it's like, wow, this is. Walk up to the courtroom, and the courtroom looked like a movie house.
Yeah.
With the beautiful chairs,
Pekin,
just like what you would think.
Like my cousin Vinny, right?
Exactly.
That's what Pekin is. That's Tazewell County. Yeah.
And the judge is up there. And there was nobody else in the courtroom, and I was there on a motion to withdraw. And I went all the way down there.
Oh, geez.
And
did you bring your green card?
The judge says, "You didn't have to come down, attorney." He got off the bench, came around the bench, shook my hand. We sat and talked. It was like, this ain't.
But you're glad you went down.
Yeah.
When you had that experience, and we're talking about it now.
It was awesome.
Had you not gone down there, you wouldn't be able to talk about it. You'll never forget that. And that's what's cool about being a lawyer.
It was such a different atmosphere down there, the way they approached it. And actually, the lawyer that was on the other side down there was a guy named Burke. and he was from Chicago.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of Chicago attorneys that go down to these small towns and become the town lawyer.
Yeah.
You know, so
why not?
Yeah, he was a nice guy. We got along really well, and but that was something I'd never forget. That judge was just like, this would never happen in Cook County.
Yeah.
You know, so before I let you go, I'm going to ask you the one question I love to ask attorneys: what makes a good attorney?
Well, you have to be a good listener, number one. Okay. I think regardless of who your client is, they're looking for a problem to be solved, most likely if they've had to retain an attorney. So while I can't address the entire profession of practicing law with a blanket statement, because again, everyone's job is different, I think you have to be a good listener. You have to be, ethics is number one for me also, at the top of the list. And I think one of the reasons why I chose the profession is because I care so much about justice. You know, I'm a justice seeker. That's just kind of in my blood, in my personality. So at the end of the day, as a litigator, those are traits that I need to have, obviously, in order to effectuate the best resolution for my client. Obviously, you got to be smart. I mean, you have to know how to talk to people. You have to know the law. If you're going to be in court, you have to know how to speak in front of a judge, how to speak to a judge, how to handle your clients, how to handle the other side. I mean, there's a lot of counseling that's involved with being an attorney. But again, if you're doing closings or you're doing another area of practice, maybe you're doing environmental law, maybe you're not dealing with the same things that I'm dealing with.
Well, I think those things that you just mentioned are important even in that. A guy who's done closings, you know.
Yeah.
You got the other side. You still have to be honest. And to tell you, I had a story about a closing I had where the attorney on the other side was not ethical.
Yeah.
And didn't tell me the truth. And I always think, you know, I was kind of a younger lawyer back then and kind of newer, and I just assumed that, you know, there was some sort of bond, right?
Yeah.
That you tell me something, it's true.
Yeah.
And it turned out that wasn't true.
Yeah.
And you know, tried to pull a fast one, and I did a specific performance case on that case and won that case actually, but it took a long time because this guy didn't tell me the truth.
If you practice long enough, okay, and if you do anything long enough, I don't care what business you're in. You could be in the restaurant business. You're going to deal with people that perhaps don't practice by the same methods and levels of ethics that you do. And you know, you as an attorney, everyone's going to react differently to those situations, right? There's fight or flight, some people say. And when I've been encountered with that, okay, you know, I will say this, and your friend Eric can attest to this, because I had a very lengthy case with him that we litigated. I was the plaintiff's attorney representing 30 some odd plaintiffs, and he represented a handful of defendants. And, you know, when I took cases, and I'm not talking about foreclosure law now, when I litigated civil matters over the years, I adopt the position of my clients. Because number one, I don't take the case unless it's got good facts, unless I think I have a high chance of winning it, number one. Or in law, if I gotta like the law too. But number two, if they've been wronged and I believe them, which I wouldn't take the case otherwise clearly, then clearly I don't trust the defendants, right? So ultimately, their attorney has to prove to me that they're ethical because they're representing
somebody that you think
that I think has wronged my client. So I almost look at it as it's adversarial, quite frankly, which is so much different from what I do in real estate as a realtor, because that's the epitome of the opposite. That's collaborative, where the parties are coming together and everyone wants the same outcome.
Win-win.
When you're litigating a case and you're butting heads and it's going on for years and years and everyone's kind of, you know, knockout, drag out, you know, to me, I'm at my best where I can fight for my clients, and it's never about money, it's never about anything like that. It's about winning for them, getting them what they deserve. And I will tell you, it hasn't been healthy for me over the years because you take your cases home with you. Sometimes it can be very stressful. I don't take cases like that anymore, specifically because of that. Because
I'm better now than not taking the cases.
Yeah, I don't do it.
But I think early on, I often took it. You know, it was like then I had to learn it wasn't my case.
Yeah,
you have to take the facts as you are. Now, again, kind of where I come from. Sometimes people, you know, are kind of I wouldn't say in the wrong, but they find themselves in the bad spot. and where other people might say that's wrong, but they still deserve some sort of help.
And I never judge people. That's the thing. I think here's the thing I can tell you about, you asked me this question, okay? This is the best thing I can say about being a great lawyer, okay? Don't judge people. Don't judge a book by its cover. Mm-hmm. Don't assume you know someone's story before you hear the story. Agreed. Because there's more than 3 sides to every story. There's 12 sides to every story. And what you've gone through in your life, or what that person's client's gone through, may not be the same path that what I went through, or he said or she said. So you should never, ever assume anything. And you look at the totality of circumstances and you make your own decision. Mm-hmm. You almost have to be a judge as a good attorney to think about what they're thinking on the other side, right? Definitely for a fact-specific case.
I talked about this yesterday because the Supreme Court came out with the case yesterday, Polselli, which was a tax case. Yeah. And, I have an idea about the way I thought that case should go. Yeah. And you know this as an attorney, right? You write a brief and you said, man, I got this. I got the law. It's this. And then you read the reply, and you're like, oh, that's pretty good.
It's never happened to me. Really? It's never happened because I represent plaintiffs most of the time. Okay, and here's why. I have not lost a case I've litigated, and it's hard to lose.
I don't know what that means. Lose, though.
Meaning they've all settled. Okay, and they've all. I'll put it to you this way: every case I filed in my name, my client would have taken way less if they would have just answered the demand letter or said, you know what, let's try and make this go away in the first 90 days. Instead, they chose to litigate it for months and years. We got way more every single time, and their attorney's fees were way higher, okay? People sometimes want to fight, and people sometimes want to defend, and people think they're going to wear you out, okay? Sometimes people that get sued have something, you look at, Trump, how many times has he been sued, right? He clearly doesn't give a shit, okay? He's going to hire attorneys. He thinks he's going to wear you out. My mindset as a plaintiff's attorney is there's no chance I'm going to let that happen. So I've never let it happen. And when I get that brief, I've gone over the law so much with a fine-tooth comb. You ask Eric. I handed him a response to a motion to dismiss that he noticed up. I didn't even take 20 days. I brought it to court, okay? He said he's never seen it before, okay? And I haven't done it since, but that's how eager I was to litigate the case, okay? If you have good law and you have good facts, it shouldn't be an issue, okay? I don't think. Okay, but you're right. There are people that are great attorneys that can make a law, that can make a judge think this is not really happening.
Bankruptcy.
You can't let that happen.
I've been in bankruptcy where I made this argument, and then the other side comes back with this other argument. It's like, wow, that's a pretty good argument.
Well, and that's an area of law where there's probably some room for.
Then you have an opportunity to reply to the response. Yeah. But then things could turn again. But it's like, wow. So that happened to me yesterday when I read that Polselli case, because I read the case, I read the opinion, and I'm thinking, actually, it was a very well thought out opinion. Yeah. And I even agreed with it. At the end, Judge Roberts Chief Justice Roberts, I should say, he's a good. He can write well.
John Roberts?
Yes.
Native of Long Beach, Indiana. Where I have a home.
I know
that. And great guy. Yeah, not great guy. I don't know him, but I'm just saying that it's nice to see a guy from local that made it.
A friend of mine went to school with him. So, they went to high school together. So, okay.
You want to talk about real estate at all? Do we have time?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Okay, but we're going to give you back. How about that?
I would love to.
Because I didn't ask you a lot of questions. One of the questions I usually ask, I'm going to ask you, but I don't want an answer, is, why did you go to law school? Is that something you always wanted to do? Answer that question.
I wanted to be a sports agent. So I called the guy.
You went to the entertainment lawyer, didn't you?
Well, that was part of the reason I got that job. But I did my undergrad at the University of Denver. I wanted to represent pro hockey players, is what I wanted to do. And I called a guy named Herb Rudoy, who at the time was representing Tony Kukoc, of the Bulls. And he said, go to law school. He said, it's real tough to get clients. Yeah. He said, no one's going to want to go. It's almost like what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? I'm going to get some Division I hockey player that, it's going to work, come to me, or some kid from Canada. It's tough. Yeah. So he said, go to law school. You can always try and figure it out later. And I said, all right. So I did. I was 22 years old.
That was your goal?
I took a year off. I had some interest in the law, but I wanted to be a sports agent. And, I think they always said you can do whatever you want with law school, which with a law degree, you can do whatever you want with any degree. Why with just a law degree?
Yeah, but a law degree gives you a kind of a heads up. So when I went to law school, I never thought I was going to be a lawyer.
Didn't really?
No,
you just want to get a law degree?
I just because I wanted to run my own business.
Wow.
And I still run my own business, but it's a law business. I never thought that that's what I was going to do.
See, I don't think the degrees helped me be a good businessman at all. I think.
It hasn't.
No, I mean, in fact,
I got a business.
I don't know how much I learned in law school about being an attorney. To be honest with you, I mean, I think it's one of those things where
it teaches you how to think, not what to think.
You have to be hands-on, hands-on practicing to learn.
I think he did
law.
that. I think he did it the right way. Is like throw you in the pool,
That's it,
and learn how to swim. And that's just the way it's got to be. And that's how when I got out of law school, I started my own practice. It's like, what do you do next? I don't know.
You never worked for anyone. Even.
No.
Yeah, I was 1 year. We're in the minority, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I never worked for anybody. It was like, what do you do next? I don't know, but I'm going to go. Right? And it just went.
And that creates a whole nother pressure and in kind of lifestyle, right? As far as what's important for.
But as you did when you were in college, with that, you just never let it go, right? You just become so obsessed with what's next that you learn it. And you immerse yourself in it. And so nobody surprised me. It wasn't. I never went unprepared. I never got in front of a judge and thought, "Oh, I'm not prepared for this." I was always prepared. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I was prepared for it, whatever it was.
100%.
So that's what I did.
And look where you are now. It's an amazing story.
I don't know if that's it's not the reason why I'm in. I'm just kidding, because I was going to say. Could be better. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I think it's longest one, Lucas.
Yep. Wow. Oh man.
But we could go on for another hour or so.
I'll come back and talk about real estate because I never talk about lawyering. It's fun. This is refreshing for me because it's been something that I haven't been really discussed much of for many years. But it's. So we'll get you back. We'll get you. You live in the neighborhood now. I'm not far. Yeah, I'd love to come back.
So we'll book you. We'll book you soon because I was having a great time. That's why I love to interview attorneys because I have so much fun talking. And of course, you and I have a lot of history.
100%.
I knew it'd be a great interview. So thanks so much for.
I'm glad we did it. Thank you for having me, Steve.
Okay, thanks so much. We're going to be next week. I don't even know if we have anybody next week, but we'll be back next week. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you then.